A Canton woman is dead after police say the woman's ex-boyfriend kidnapped her and took police on a chase.
She had just 2 more semesters to go, a college senior and early childhood education major, working long shifts at Subway, picking up extra hours at Walmart, and raising her baby girl. But on a quiet Friday in May 2020, everything stopped. Because just after 11 a.m., Fionicia Ratliff was kidnapped. What followed wasn't just a manhunt. It was a desperate race to save a young mother from the very person she had already begged police to protect her from a man who, just days earlier, had been arrested for pointing a loaded gun in her face. But this isn't a story about bad luck or wrong place, wrong time. This was a slow, visible tragedy that everyone saw coming, and no one stopped. And now, one young mother is gone and one baby is left behind. And one question would echo louder than all the rest. How did the system fail her again? Let's go back, because to understand what happened at mile marker 30 on I-55, you need to understand what happened in the months leading up to it, and why every single warning was ignored. But before we begin, if you find this video interesting, please give it a like at the end, and tell me what you think about the case. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you. Fionicia Ratliff was born on August 7, 1996 in Canton, Mississippi, a quiet, tightly knit town just north of Jackson. She was raised by her mother, Suzanne Ratliff, and her father, Fitzgerald Otto, in a blended household filled with the usual chaos of 4 siblings. She attended Canton High School, where her teachers described her as focused, respectful, and effortlessly kind, but her ambitions didn't stop there. After high school, she enrolled at Jackson State University, majoring in early childhood education. Her dream was to teach, to nurture, and to give other children the same kind of guidance and care she had been raised with. And she worked for it every single day. While some of her classmates leaned on student loans or stayed with family, Fionicia took on 2 jobs. She worked the early shift at Subway and picked up late-night hours at Walmart, clocking in, clocking out, studying in between. And even then, she still made time for summer classes just to get ahead. She wanted more for herself and more for her daughter, because at the center of Fionicia's life was her baby girl.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. No.
Be a big girl, baby.
That didn't hurt. That didn't hurt. That didn't hurt.
Everything she did, every class, every shift, every sleepless night, was for her daughter. Her sorority sisters in Zeta Phi Beta remembered how Fionicia lit up anytime she spoke about being a mom. Fionicia wasn't just a student. She wasn't just a mother or an employee or a sorority sister. She was the kind of person people turned to when things got hard, because she made everything feel a little lighter, even when the world was heavy. But while Fionicia gave so much to others, very few knew how much she was carrying herself. Because behind that gentle strength was a young woman facing battles no 23-year-old should have to fight. She was navigating school, work, single motherhood, and custody court, often alone. And even as she tried to stay ahead in life, there was one part of her past that kept pulling her backward. A relationship she had left behind, one she had fought hard to escape, was still trailing her. So while everyone saw her as the girl with the bright smile, what they didn't see was the fear building behind it. And what came next would prove just how hard Fionicia had tried to protect herself and her child, even when the system refused to protect her back. Fionicia Ratliff met Jamarcus Black back in high school. At the time, it felt like the kind of relationship that would grow with them, young love forged in familiar places with familiar faces. They dated on and off for nearly 8 years. It was long, complicated, and deeply entangled in the rhythms of Fionicia's life, especially as she moved from adolescence into adulthood. But things began to shift in 2018. On November 20th of that year, she gave birth to her daughter, Jordan, and everything changed, at least for Fionicia. She became more focused, more determined to give her child the stability and love she deserved. Motherhood became her anchor, but for Jamarcus, it became a point of control. What should have been a shared joy quickly turned into a source of conflict. He began accusing her of trapping him, suggesting that the pregnancy had been part of some manipulative plan to tie him down. And even though there was no truth to it, he weaponized the idea. He began withholding access to the baby, refusing to return Jordan after visits unless Fionicia gave in to his demands. It didn't stop there. He belittled her every chance he got, mocked her for going to college, called her selfish for working long hours. He made it clear that he didn't want her to succeed unless he was in control of how she got there. And so the control escalated. He started showing up at her job at Walmart, uninvited, unannounced, then at Jackson State University, then outside her apartment, and eventually, it crossed the line. He began climbing through her window at night. No knocking, as if boundaries didn't apply to him, as if her space, her safety, didn't matter. Still, Fionicia said nothing publicly. To the outside world, she remained focused on her studies, on her child, on her goals. But behind the scenes, she was becoming a prisoner to fear. The kind of fear that made her check the locks twice, the kind that made her glance over her shoulder walking to her car, the kind that kept her up at night, listening for footsteps that didn't belong. And he knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't hiding it. He wanted her to feel cornered, powerless. Jamarquis began using emotional blackmail as a weapon. He would make promises, then break them. He'd act apologetic, only to lash out when she didn't comply. He'd remind her that their child connected them, and use that connection to pull strings whenever he wanted something. And Fionicia, like so many women in her position, stayed quiet, not because she didn't want help, but because she feared what might happen if she asked for it. So she endured, all while knowing that the person she had once trusted most was now her greatest threat. And soon, that fear would no longer be hidden behind closed doors. It would spill into the open, because Fionicia finally decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. By late April 2020, Fionicia Ratliff had already endured months of emotional threats, harassment, and control. But what happened on April 28th made one thing terrifyingly clear. Jamarquis Black was willing to take it further. That afternoon, he walked into the Subway restaurant where Fionicia worked. He wasn't there to talk, he wasn't there to negotiate, and he came in with a gun. It was just after a routine lunch rush when he entered the store, approached her directly, and made a demand that sent a chill down her spine. "Give me the baby," he told her. Then, in the same breath, he added something that turned the moment into a nightmare. "I'll finish it for you." Those were his exact words. And for the first time, Fionicia knew this wasn't just intimidation. It was a direct threat on her life and the life of her child. But she didn't panic. She waited until she was clear of danger, then flagged down a nearby police officer and gave a full account. Within hours, police had Jamarquis in custody. He was arrested for DV and stalking. Officers confiscated the gun he had brought to the store. For a moment, it seemed like the law was finally catching up to him. On May 8th, formal charges were filed, and for the first time there was paperwork to back up the fear Fionicia had been living with for months. But then came May 11th. Just 3 days after the charges were filed, Jamarquis posted a $1,500 cash bond, barely a dent in the standard $15,000 bail, and walked free. Yes, a restraining order was issued. Yes, it was meant to keep him away from Fionicia. But there was no follow-up. No law enforcement check-ins and no enforced buffer zone around her workplace, her home, or her daughter. It was just a piece of paper, and Fionicia knew exactly what that meant. To the courts, it looked like due process, but to her, it felt like a countdown. Because those who work with domestic violence survivors know what too many victims find out too late. Charges don't stop violence. They often provoke it. And once someone like Jamarquis is pushed into a corner, once the legal system dares to call out their behavior, they don't retreat, they retaliate. Advocates in her community would later say that what happened to Fionicia follows a dangerous, familiar pattern where threats escalate, charges are filed, the abuser is briefly detained, and then he's back, free to try again, free to punish her for speaking up, and free to make her pay for protecting herself and her child. So even as Jamarquis walked out of jail, the danger didn't pass, it just changed form. And Fionicia, now with legal documentation in hand, was still left unguarded, still waiting for a justice system that never truly showed up. On the night of May 14, 2020, it was quiet on Dinkin Street in Canton, Mississippi. Fionicia Ratliff had just finished another long day as she pulled into the driveway of her mother's home with her younger sister Alexandria beside her. It was close to 11 p.m. But what no one knew at that moment was that Jamarque Black had been waiting. He had been hiding in the bushes just feet away from Suzanne Ratliff's house, watching, and as soon as the car stopped, he moved. Fionicia opened her door, took a few steps toward the house, and that's when he leapt out with gun in hand. He grabbed her, pushed the gun against her, and demanded she go with him. Alexandria saw what was happening and didn't hesitate. She threw herself between them, trying to stop him. But before she could even speak, he fired, a single shot tearing through her thigh, and she collapsed instantly. Bleeding and unable to move, she could only watch as Jamarque dragged Fionicia toward his car, shoved her inside, and sped off into the night. However, inside the house, Suzanne heard the gunshot. She rushed outside, only to find one daughter on the ground and the other being taken, and she called 911 immediately. Her voice shook, but she gave the dispatcher every detail she could, and within minutes, a statewide alert was issued. An Amber Alert for 23-year-old Fionicia Ratliff, last seen being forced into a silver car driven by her ex-boyfriend, a man who was already under court order to stay away from her. Alexandria was rushed to the hospital, her injury serious but not fatal. And even in pain, she gave officers the same story. Jamarque had taken her sister by force. There was no more question about his intent and no more doubt about the danger, but by the time law enforcement mobilized, he was already gone. And with him, so was Fionicia. But police didn't wait. They immediately began triangulating Jamarque Black's cell phone, and it showed movement headed northeast. He had already crossed county lines, driving Fionicia deep into Neshoba County, straight toward Philadelphia, Mississippi. And by dawn, he had stopped at a place no one expected, his aunt's home. Around 6 a.m., Suzanne Ratliff's phone rang. It was Jamarcus. He said, "Bring Jordan to my aunt's house. If you do, I'll let Fionicia go." This was her daughter's life. So she complied. She got Jordan ready, packed her into the car, and made the nearly 90-minute drive to Philadelphia. She arrived as instructed, and when she pulled up, Elizabeth Black Wooten, Jamarque's mother, was already there. Suzanne looked her in the eye, hoping for answers, but all Elizabeth said was, "I'm so sorry." It didn't sound like relief, and it didn't sound like hope. Suzanne left Jordan behind, then returned home, uncertain whether she had just saved her daughter or handed over her granddaughter to a killer. The hours dragged by with no word, no location, no signal, no updates. But law enforcement refused to let up. They expanded the search radius, added more manpower, and tapped into federal resources. By mid-morning, the Mississippi Highway Patrol had locked onto a possible location, and by early afternoon, U.S. Marshals joined in. Then came the break. His vehicle was spotted speeding southbound on Interstate 55 near mile marker 30 in Lincoln County. When patrol units attempted to approach, he hit the gas. What followed was a high-speed chase across multiple county lines, reckless turns, dodged vehicles, flashing lights behind him, and helicopters overhead. But he didn't stop. Not until his car finally crashed off the side of the road near Bogue Chitto. The vehicle was badly damaged, but still upright. Officers surrounded it immediately, weapons drawn, safety protocols engaged. They shouted commands, they waited, they negotiated, but he refused to exit. Inside the vehicle, it was silent. The doors were locked with no movement and no words. They didn't know if Fionicia was still alive or already gone. Then, 2 gunshots shattered the silence. It happened fast. In an unexpected twist of events, the very thing they feared most became reality. Officers sprinted toward the vehicle, weapons ready. They shattered the passenger window and forced open the doors. And just like that, it was over. Both were dead. Jamarque had shot Fionicia in the head, and then he turned the gun on himself.
After and took police on a chase. 12 News' Linnea Lewis is live in Canton with more on what happened. What can you tell us, Linnea?
Well, police say that Fionicia Ratliff came home from work last night to her ex-boyfriend jumping out of the bushes and kidnapping her. Now, here's a picture of his mugshot, and this is actually from last week. Her mother, Suzanne Briscoe, says that the suspect, Jamarque Black, has a history of violent behavior. Just last Friday, the family called police after he tried to stalk Ratliff at home and work. He was arrested and charged with domestic violence and aggravated stalking, but that did not stop him from kidnapping her.
Last night around 11 something is when it actually all occurred. So probably by the time we actually were able to ping his phone, he was in Carthage. And then we tracked him from that location to Philadelphia, at which time it started giving us, I guess, according to them, the towers wasn't giving accurate information or whatever.
Authorities were able to locate Black and Ratliff in this black vehicle this morning. Police chased him, and that's when he shot himself and Ratliff.
When the news reached Suzanne Ratliff, she collapsed to her knees at her subway shift.
I went in my job to get me something to drink, and he opened the door, and his facial expression, and I said, he shot her, and he said, yes. And I said, is he dead?
Eugene Ratliff, her brother and Fionicia's uncle, struggled to find words. His voice cracked as he said, "There's nothing I wouldn't do. I wasn't able to be there to help her."
I love my niece to death. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my family. And I wasn't even able to be there for to try to help her. I'm so proud of her. She took a bullet for her sister. She was willing to die to try to save her sister. She tried to be civil with him. That didn't work.
But grief was only the beginning. Alexandria Ratliff, who had been shot trying to save her sister, survived the gunshot wound to her thigh. Doctors expected her to recover physically, but the emotional scars would take longer to heal. Jordan, the daughter Fionicia had fought to protect, was sent temporarily to the custody of Jamarquis's aunt. The irony was unbearable. So Suzanne did what her daughter couldn't. She hired lawyers and began a legal fight to gain joint custody of her granddaughter, so Jordan could grow up knowing her mother's side of the family, and not just the shadow of her father's violence. Then something unexpected happened. In September 2020, U.S. Attorney Mike Hurst announced a new federal initiative, Operation Fionicia. Backed by $6 million in funding from the Department of Justice, the program was designed to address one critical failure: how often the system allows known abusers to fall through the cracks, because in this case, he had been arrested a week earlier and then released. The initiative focused on training prosecutors, judges, and law enforcement in escalation risk assessment and gun confiscation procedures, particularly in DV cases. The morning of May 23, 2020, began quietly in Canton, Mississippi as family, friends, and an entire community gathered to bury Fionicia Ratliff. She was laid to rest at Burke's Cemetery, also known as Onisha Burke's Memory Gardens. Her casket, white and surrounded by soft blooms, sat beneath the Mississippi sky, a heartbreaking symbol of a life taken too soon. There were no empty seats. People came from across the state, classmates from Jackson State, co-workers from Walmart and Subway, childhood friends, neighbors, even complete strangers who had followed her story. They came because they knew this wasn't just another funeral. This was a goodbye to a mother, a daughter, a sister, a peacemaker. Her Zeta Phi Beta sorority sisters stood together, eyes brimming with tears, as they placed blue roses beside her casket. They remembered her as gentle, loyal, and radiant. She had always called them her forever sisters. 1 year later, on May 15, 2021, they gathered again, this time for a memorial. Purple and white balloons rose into the air over her new headstone. People shared memories, released tears, and held hands tightly. So, what do you think about this case? What could have been done differently to save Fionicia Ratliff? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. We read every single one of them, and believe me, so do others. Your insight could be the voice someone else needs to hear, because somewhere out there, someone might be going through something similar, and your words could help them see things clearly. If this story moved you, taught you something, or made you think, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next true crime deep dive. We're telling these stories not just to remember the victims, but to shine a light on the warning signs before it's too late. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next